What's going on, people? I am dukedobbins, FTW, and today I want to talk about how cross-platform play between the Xbox One and PS4 can revolutionize the gaming industry, and why it's so important that gamers everywhere do more to support its development and implementation. If the consoles had cross-play capabilities, we would see two major changes take place in the online multiplayer genre. One immediate, the other gradual. In the short term, playlists across every game would see massive population boosts, often doubling the amount of available players online, which would dramatically increase the quality of the affected games in a number of different and exciting ways. But more importantly, the increased playlist populations would remove an industry barrier to entry that has shut massive amounts of competition and diversity out of the online multiplayer genre, to the detriment of gamers everywhere. Now, a barrier to entry is any economic obstacle that prevents new businesses or products from entering a market. And there are a number of different kinds of economic obstacles you'll see depending on the industry you're in. The simplest and most universal example would be supplier or distributor exclusivity agreements, right? Obviously, we've seen our fair share of these in the gaming industry. Many companies often include these in their business contracts to try and shut out their competition. So we'll use fast food as a hypothetical. McDonald's needs beef for their burgers, right? So they go into business with a beef supplier. And they include a clause in the contract they sign with said beef supplier that says you cannot supply beef to any of our competitors because we don't want Burger King getting their dirty hands on the same beef we use, right? We want our beef to be different from that of our competitors and ideally better. Now, the other major fast food companies, your Taco Bells and all of them, are gonna strike these same kind of exclusivity agreements with their own beef suppliers. But the problem is now, if a new company wants to enter the fast food business, they're going to have a very difficult time finding a beef supplier, right? Because all the major ones have been taken. And if they do find one, it's going to be of a significantly lower quality because it's what's left over, right? The best suppliers will have already been nabbed up by the other established fast food chains, and whatever suppliers are left are the ones that weren't good enough, all right? They didn't make the cut. And so because of this, it's very hard for new businesses to break into the market because they would be at such a severe disadvantage. It's an economic barrier to entry. And further evidence of this is, when was the last time you saw like a new fast food chain crop up, right? I mean, it's been the same 5 or 6 major fast food chains that have dominated the market for the last, since before most of us were born. Now, there are a whole shitload of different kinds of barriers to entry. Some of them are fair, some aren't, some are ethical, some aren't. But that's a big discussion that we'll save for another commentary. For now, what's important to remember is that the consumer always benefits from fewer barriers to entry, because the consumer always benefits from more competition. The more competitors on the market pushing their products, the harder every individual company has to work to win your purchase. They have to put that much more effort into making a higher quality game. And the truth is, a lot of the businesses getting shut out by these barriers to entry may actually be higher quality than the already established status quo businesses in the industry, right? They're just not getting a fair shot to prove it. There may be a better fast food joint out there who will fucking deliver your fast food and give you better prices for better burgers, and they have a super secret beef marinating process or something. And they put their employees through rigorous customer service training, but no matter how good those businesses are, no matter how good their ideas are, they aren't going to have a chance to demonstrate that if there's nobody to supply them beef, because all the major beef suppliers are taken and signed into exclusivity deals. And barriers to entry are a big part of the reason you see so many industries basically stagnant with a duopoly that nobody likes. Prime examples being the 2 major game publishers and the 2 major internet service providers. Think Comcast and AT&T, EA, and Activision. They are all universally disliked by their customers for a number of reasons, which most often revolve around terrible customer service and general incompetence, and that's been the case for like a decade. But despite that, they remain on top, and they aren't even getting any better. We have the same complaints with them now as we did 5 years ago, but they don't have to try harder because there's no new competition to threaten them, because consumers have nowhere else to go. It's like price fixing, except it's reverse quality fixing. If there's only 2 major companies to fill the role in an industry, then hey, as long as we both suck equally, neither of us has to try harder. Another perhaps more relevant example would be in the past when major Call of Duty YouTubers get early access to footage of the next game, right? And I've talked about this before, they all make a bazillion of the same redundant, pointless ass videos. These major COD YouTubers have already put out a dozen videos each. Literally none of them has anything to actually say that you couldn't just read in a simple 3-minute read of a news article. They make all these pointless videos, and because they have the early access footage and the subscriber base advantage, they're going to clog up the front page of all the search results, right, for that game, and it makes it nearly impossible for new channels to break into the COD media market, which sucks for the viewer most of all, because I guarantee you there are a lot of YouTubers out there who would put out much better content than the Ali A's and T Martins of the world, but you, the viewer, will never get to see those channels because any new competition gets shut out by these early access deals, which act as significant barriers to entry. So just as we've been widely disappointed with the overall quality of our major internet service providers and game publishers, so too have we generally been disappointed by the quality of our online multiplayer games lately. The new Call of Duty trailer has more dislikes than likes. That shit is supposed to be the top product from the top company. Clearly there's widespread discontent with the status quo of online multiplayer games, and I know this because I built a channel off the shit. Now, this general discontent is driven by the oversaturation of the genre by low-quality, generic, and unimaginative titles, and a big part of what drives that low-quality oversaturation is the unique and significant barrier to entry plaguing online multiplayer gaming. And that is playlist populations, or lack thereof. The trouble with multiplayer games is that a huge part of their functionality is based on having other people to play against, and the game is incomplete if there aren't other people to play against. You can't have a boxing match with only one boxer. If it's a multiplayer-only game, like Evolve and Titanfall, the game just simply doesn't exist. It doesn't work if it's just you playing it, if it's just one person. Even if it's 10 people, the game needs at least a few thousand people to actually be a game, to exist, to function in any capacity whatsoever. And most of us who have been playing online games long enough know this. We know that a game's quality is distinctly affected by how many players it has online. Gamers universally refer to games as dead once their playlist populations fall below a certain point. So the problem is that you're never going to be able to bring an online multiplayer game to life unless you have the resources to ensure that you can retain a few thousand people online at all times of the day. And if you can't do that, the product you built isn't going to work, and then you can't responsibly sell it, and if you try to sell it anyways, it'll piss off a bunch of people who will want refunds and run you out of town. This barrier to entry effectively shuts small developers, indie developers, and niche games out of the market because it takes a significant amount of resources to even reach that many people. You have to have a significant advertising budget, which most indie devs or small devs are going to have a hard time affording, or you build a grassroots social media presence, but I'll tell you from experience, that shit is hard starting from scratch. And that sucks because oftentimes some of the best products come from small, passionate developers with great ideas, or from just individuals who don't even have a company. You know, that's what Minecraft was, right? It was some college guy who did it as a fucking hobby and accidentally created the most popular game of all time. But Minecraft is still fully functional single player. You can still play survival, you can still build great things and play all that it has to play. I mean, it's better with more people, but it's still fully functional single player. If Minecraft were unable to function without a large pool of players, then the most popular game in history wouldn't have ever seen the light of day, because that shit did not start out with a marketing campaign. This is a big reason you see so few indie online multiplayer games, whereas you see like 10 new indie single-player games every day. Tragically, most developers have to bend the knee to a major publisher if they are serious about putting out a successful $60 title that doesn't lose all its functionality within 6 months because it doesn't have enough players online. And certainly most of us agree that many of the problems with today's gaming are driven by major publishers trying to milk every last penny out of every game, even if it harms the overall user experience. With the mega multiplayer titles like Destiny or COD, you often will see more resources poured into advertising than actual development, which is important because in a way, advertising, marketing, is a crucial part of the game development itself, because the more people you have online, the higher quality the overall experience is going to be on that game. Faster matchmaking times, better connections, and most importantly, more playlists, right? This is the big one, okay? There's literally a direct ratio between how many players you have online and how many playlists you can afford to have in the game, right? So a game like COD can afford to have several dozen playlists because it has so many players. More playlists means more content, more replay value, different ways to experience the game, and so newer, smaller titles, indie games, niche games are always going to be at a severe quantitative disadvantage. They're always going to be plagued by complaints of lack of content, and a lot of the time it won't be because they didn't want to put in more content, it's because they didn't have a large enough player base to put that content in without damaging the overall functionality of the game. And keep in mind, the more resources these much bigger, already established games pour into their massive marketing campaigns, the harder it becomes for smaller games to get noticed in that kind of environment. So if you look at a game like Evolve, for example, right, this was a first-person asymmetrical shooter. It was a niche shooter. It did not have wide appeal. The developers knew that, but I really enjoyed it, and I know my boy Leatherwood fucking loved it. But it didn't have wide appeal, and I get that. It had a very high skill gap, high learning curve, and a specific type of gameplay that was meant for a specific type of audience, a niche game, right? But the problem is that game was largely unplayable within less than a year, because it just didn't have the playlist populations to survive. And had crossplay been implemented then, had Evolve been able to pull together the players it had on Xbox and PS4, maybe even PC, well then it would probably still be alive. Because the shit snowballs. The less players you have online, the faster you lose players, because less players means much longer matchmaking times, and I remember even just a few weeks after release, Evolve matchmaking times became frustratingly long, and the long matchmaking times turned off even more players, and as it lost more players, matchmaking times became even longer, and that cycle continues. So, as soon as playlist populations fall below a certain point where matchmaking times and connection quality are adversely and noticeably affected, then the snowball begins. Then the game's fate is already sealed, and it's just a matter of time. And what happened to Evolve is unfortunately what's going to happen to most niche games in the current environment, if any developers are even brave enough to try and make niche games, which most of the time I don't think they are, because you don't see a lot of niche games like Evolve. And again, if you were paying attention to Evolve, you would definitely be that much more discouraged from trying to do something like Evolve again, because Evolve died pretty quickly. And that sucks, because if it's a multiplayer only title like Evolve, then you can't even really sell it after a certain point, because if it's dead, then it's no longer, it's dead, it's no longer functional. You can't go sell an Evolve today. That'd be kind of a fucked up thing to do, because somebody would get on the game, they can't even play the game because it's dead. And that fucking sucks, because that means the only big multiplayer titles that are going to get made and or survive longer than a year are the generic ones that appeal to everyone, that have low skill gaps so everyone can play them. So playlist populations are a significant barrier to entry for new online multiplayer games. Opening up the two major gaming consoles to crossplay would not remove this barrier entirely, but it would lower it by half, or even more than that, and foster a much friendlier environment for new businesses and products to enter the market. Gamers would see a massive increase in the variety of games available to them, right? Niche games, maybe it's something asymmetrical like Evolve, maybe it's a third-person cover system shooter like Gears, or a class-based thing like Overwatch, or some turn-based fucking thing, or a sports game, or whatever. You're gonna have more of those kind of options more often. For me, it's Plants vs. Zombies, that's my niche game. And then there are gonna be people who prefer those kind of niche games over the big popular FPS type games, but even many of the people who prefer the big sort of generic COD type shooters are still gonna appreciate having more options to switch off to when they get burnt on COD or whatever. There's gonna be much more opportunity for great ideas to be realized. Games like Rocket League, you know, and games that are just really good ideas that haven't been done yet. There's another Rocket League out there. There's another great idea out there on par with Minecraft, except it's online multiplayer, and it just hasn't had the chance to prove itself yet. Crossplay doubles the odds that those games break out of obscurity and revolutionize the industry. There's a fucking amazing game out there that you haven't gotten to play because it doesn't exist yet, because it can't get over that barrier to entry. And the more games you have cropping up, the harder the big AAA titles like COD have to compete to hold on to their player base, right? Because it'll be death by 1,000 cuts. You know, they're losing 4% of their player base to this game and 2% to that game, another 7% of their player base to that other game. Now they have to really step up and try harder to keep you on COD. That means they're putting in more content, higher quality content, new content that neutralizes the primary strengths of their competition, right? COD gets scared of Titanfall, they put in wall running. There's some fucking great ideas out there that we haven't seen yet that's gonna come threaten Call of Duty, and Call of Duty is gonna have to up the fucking ante to defend its market share. And that's good for us. Even if you don't care about niche games or new games or variety games, even if you only like Call of Duty, that's good for you, because Call of Duty is gonna be better. Because it's going to have to be better. In the long run, it would dramatically increase the quality of every online multiplayer game out there. It would increase the variety and options that gamers have. And even if you don't care about all that shit, we all know that having playlist populations doubled or tripled by crossplay by itself would immediately and significantly improve the user experience on every game. When you have that many more people in the playlist, you're going to see much better connection quality, you're going to see faster matchmaking times, it's going to be much easier to match players and teams of equal skill, which I know nobody wants in COD, but in every other game that's a plus. And again, higher populations means more playlists. COD, for example, could probably double the amount of playlists it has right now if we had crossplay. Imagine having Chaos Mosh Pit and Nuketown 24/7, and Hardcore Nuketown 24/7. Imagine having Hardpoint and Headquarters, and Infection, and fucking, you know, Momentum, and Blitz, and Search and Destroy, and Search and Rescue. Games would live a lot longer. Evolve would still be alive. Other games would still be alive. You wouldn't have so many games dying in less than a year like you do now. You'd have games living 2-3 years, so you can go back and play when you get bored, when you've taken a break from it, you want to go back and try it. When you want to try it with your friend, when you want to go to the store and buy a cheap used game that's, you know, 2 years old, you buy it and you want to be able to get on it and still have it work and not have it be all fucking fucked up functionality because of low playlist populations. So we have a fuck ton to gain from crossplay. The question is, will it happen? As of right now, Rocket League is the only major title to really embrace cross-platform play between the consoles and PC, but not console to console. They've actually said they have the tech to run this game cross-platform between X1 and PS4, and they really want to, but they haven't gotten the go-ahead from Sony. Which brings me to the point of this commentary. The tens of millions of us that make up the online gaming community are close to attaining something that gamers have dreamed about for decades. But to get all the way, more gamers everywhere are going to have to get way more excited about this and start communicating to Sony and to whoever else that this is something we fucking expect them to support and implement. Because under present conditions, the major companies involved have very little financial incentive to do this. The exception being Microsoft, whose decision to pursue this endeavor is the only thing that has suddenly made crossplay a very real possibility in a way that it never has been before. They have now updated the Xbox One with the tech necessary to support crossplay with the PC and PS4. Now, this isn't some action out of the kindness of Microsoft's heart. This is cold, hard, free market competition at its best. Xbox is hoping to neutralize PlayStation's greatest competitive advantage, which is that it has a whole lot more players online. Right, so we all know that right out the gate, PlayStation basically won the console war this generation. I could do a whole commentary on why that is. I probably will eventually. Suffice it to say, Kinect sucks major donkey balls, and charging an extra $100 for that donkey balls feature was a terrible idea. But obviously since then, the Xbox has ditched Kinect and brought its price down to $400, matching the PS4. So what you have to ask is, well, now that these consoles are the same price, and since their technological capabilities are basically a wash, right? There's not anything that one console can do that the other other can't, what is the primary consideration people are making when they are deciding which console to buy? It's human nature to weigh the pros and cons of shit, especially when you're about to drop $400. But because the consoles are so similar in price and functionality, it's hard to draw a contrast between the two. And because of that, the primary, if not the only consideration people are going to take into account when trying to choose which console to buy is what are most of my friends on? On which console am I going to be able to play with friends the most often? And so PlayStation has a huge advantage there because based on current console sales, it is twice as likely that most of your friends or more of your friends are on PlayStation. So PlayStation has the benefit of a snowball effect, right? The more people they have on PS4, the more they are going to get, and so on and so forth. So what Xbox is hoping to do is halt that snowball in its tracks, because if they can pressure PlayStation into crossplay, people will no longer have to consider which console their friends are on because it won't matter, they can play with them regardless. And so suddenly, poof, that snowball, PlayStation's biggest competitive advantage, is gone. Now PlayStation knows this, and that's why so far they've been non-committal. And you can already tell by the way they worded this response that they are trying to PR their way out of this. First, they make a point of mentioning that they have already supported crossplay in the past. Whoa, we already did it, okay? And then they say they are open to having a conversation about it. It's kind of like when you used to ask your mom if you can buy that new game and she says, I'll think about it. But really, you know, that just fucking means no and she wants you to shut up. With this statement, they are trying to avoid the public backlash they would face if they just came right out and said no, while at the same time not having to say yes. It delays it, right? It makes everyone think they're having some conversation. They're not having a conversation, they're just waiting for you to forget about it. It's clever PR. I think what they're hoping is that they can just delay for a bit. The buzz from Xbox announcing crossplay will die down, people will forget about this and move on. We're all acclimated to the status quo as it is anyways. And that's why I wanted to make this video, and that's why I hope more gamers will start talking about this issue and requesting and demanding it in future titles, because it would be a damn shame if demand for this feature fizzles out and we miss this wonderful opportunity. Please remember to rate the video. The For the Win query of the day is, how many more friends do you think you would play with if crossplay were available? Like, how many friends do you have on the opposite console? Thanks for watching. This is Batman signing out.
Play of the game.